Hey, this is Patrick Coffin with some thoughts about the Joe Rogan Donald Trump interview that you might have missed. If you like media analysis, if you like connecting dots, if you want to participate in exposing false media narratives, you might like to join the True North community. Go to patrickcoffin.media. There's tons of free stuff there. Click the link to the community and find out what folks in multiple countries are enjoying each and every day. That's patrickcoffin.media. And if you like sleeping at night, check out the link to mypillow.com. I'm a proud affiliate of MyPillow. I've interviewed Mike Lindell a bunch of times. I love their products. In fact, I'm wearing, I did not pre-rehearse this, amazing MyPillow slippers. They have doggy beds for your pets. They have towels, bathrobes, sheets, everything. MyPillow.com. My name, Patrick, gets you the 60% more Patrick Coffin Show discount. That's Patrick at the checkout is the coupon from MyPillow.com. Okay, into the conversation that Joe Rogan finally had with ex-president, probably future president Donald Trump. As of this filming, it has just under 40 million views in a few days. Our dear friends over at the YouTube have made it hard to find. If you look for the Trump Rogan interview, it will not, chances are very good, it will not come up as one of your first couple of choices. But despite that, almost 40 million views. So I'm asking why? Because this conversation had no particular beginning, middle, or end. It was very rambling. President Trump was talking about he likes to weave. I'm weaving, kind of getting some tributaries going off the river, going a little bit off topic. And Joe, to his credit, did try to get Trump back on some kind of single direction of this conversation. Around a second after the 5-minute mark, he asks him what it was like to be in the White House for the first time. Was it surreal, as soon as you got in there? And Trump's answer was kind of strange. He said it was surreal to, stand in this historic, beautiful building. Trump's in the building business. He knows about interior design and beauty, and he was genuinely impressed and kind of moved by being in the White House for the first time. But then he quickly segued to a topic that Rogan doesn't pick up until another hour. This is a 3-hour conversation, remember. Mr. Trump says, well, yes, it was surreal, but not compared to how real it was to get shot in the ear. And he said he quickly changes gears. And before I say anything else, let me say that Donald Trump does not really speak in full sentences. He speaks in phrases, and he repeats those phrases. He'll start a thought and stop it and go zig, and then he'll go zag. And when he's asked early on about the 5-minute mark, he says that when he was on the ground, referring now to the loud noise event in Butler, PA, I'm going to get into the 10 strange features of that loud noise event in Butler, PA in just a few minutes. But he said, yeah, I knew where I was, and I knew I was hit in the ear, and I was only hit in the ear. And then he emphasizes all the blood. There was so much blood. And as doctors know, he says, when you get hit in the ear, any injury to the ear, he says, as you know, Joe, from your MMA experience, it's copious amounts of blood. He says the same thing in the speech that he gave to the RNC convention. The only trouble is there really wasn't a lot of blood. If you look at the footage of the shooting event in Butler, he doesn't really have any blood on his hands when he reacts to, remember, he looks to his right, and then he does this, and he almost seems to drop something on the podium. It's a strange little clip where he turns his head and you hear the pop, pop, pop. Not a lot of blood. And then on the ground, there's rivulets of blood appear for the fight, photo op that happened immediately after. But I'm going to get to that in a second in a more detailed way. But he goes on and on about the blood and how real it was compared to the surreality of being in the White House for the first time. And then it segues into anecdotes about the Civil War and generals, and he keeps talking about the fake generals that he had to deal with, I guess Democrat-minded generals, not like the real generals. And then he mentions Robert E. Lee, who was the general up against fighting for the South during the Lincoln presidency. And he says that President Nixon was he had the yips which is a golf term. You're nervous over a putt. You've got the yips. And Lincoln, according to President Trump, was obsessed with Robert E. Lee because he won like 15 battles in a row, and he was like an unstoppable juggernaut. And the Civil War was not going the way Lincoln wanted to. And then he segues back to bragging about the fact that his generals, with his under his command, destroyed the entire ISIS caliphate, and not years like they said that it would take, but within weeks. So this is a running theme, Trump bragging that he destroyed ISIS within weeks, comparing his generals to, I guess, being better than Robert E. Lee since the South lost to the North. And then Joe Rogan asks him when he shifted from Democrat to Republican, and he kind of pauses and he says, the early 90s. Well, that's not really quite true. This, by the way, this is not me fact-checking President Trump. I'm supporting President Trump, because I think a Trump administration is going to do a lot less damage to the country than if the corrupt cackler gets in. So this is not anti-Trump. It's not anti-MAGA, although I'm not really a MAGA member. I'm certainly supporting Donald Trump for to return to the White House. But not only did he not really change from Democrat to Republican in the early 90s, he's changed a lot. He was registered as a Republican in Manhattan as early as 1987. Then he switched party affiliation since then 5 different times. In 1999, he changes his affiliation again to the Independence Party in New York. And then August 2001, he shifted to the Democrat Party. Then in September 2009, he dropped his party affiliation, and then he went to the Republican Party in December of 2011. And then he changed to no party. He was independent for a while. And then finally, April 2012, he returned again to the Republican Party. So he's kind of a party chameleon. I can hear a song by Culture Club about him being a party chameleon. Someone else is going to have to make that one. So he rambles. He talks about police and Biden and tariffs. Elon Musk. He goes out of his way to praise Elon Musk. Apparently, we're all supposed to praise Elon Musk. He talks about Starlink, and it's just rambling. Again, no sentences, just phrases. It's almost like President Trump knows how to hypnotize the country, hypnotize his viewers. He puts you in a bit of a trance because he repeats things, and he has this gesture. Now, he didn't use it a lot when he was sitting down. I noticed this. Trump sitting down speaks differently than Trump standing up. Trump standing up uses it's a move known in NLP circles, neuro-linguistic programming, as an anchor. He'll do this. Now, President Kennedy did this, and Bill Clinton famously, kind of took that up. This is Kennedy's go-to gesture. Trump's is this, and he'll repeat a phrase over and over again. So when he does that with the phrase, it's another layer of sharpness to the words, and it makes them unforgettable. He's a very, very good communicator. Crooked Hillary, low energy Jeb, little Marco Rubio. he coins these phrases and he repeats them ad nauseum, ad infinitum. You can't forget them. It's like a jingle from a commercial. Once it's in there, it's like a little brain worm. So very effective in his use of repetition. And then he goes on a tear against Joe Biden's disgraceful abandonment of the Bagram Air Force Base. This is in Afghanistan. And that goes on for a while. And then he says that it's really rather close to China. Now, when he gets to China, this is one of his favorite themes. China. The building standards there, he says, are all screwed up by environmentalist silliness. I should say the environmentalist standards here to get anything built is, ridiculous. They'll go after some rare bird whose the whole species is allegedly threatened if you build this building, or a worm or a parasite or some fish, and you can hold up projects for years based on environmental wacko extremism. So this conversation's cobbled together. There's no through line. It's very catch as catch can. Not that you want an interview to be about one thing. It doesn't have to follow one direction. I hate interviews. I'm a student of Jack Parr and Dick Cavett. They didn't really do interviews, they had conversations. However, it's so eclectic. It's just all over the universe. And it just goes on and on and on. You kind of have to put it on double time. Let me say one thing before I get into his claim that if you put a cork in the ocean in China in a week and a half, it gets to the coast of USA. And that is Trump's voice. I mentioned earlier that Trump standing up is very different from Trump sitting down. Sitting down with Joe Rogan, he was sedate. He seemed to have energy, but his voice was a lot softer. It was more granddad. It wasn't quite so alpha male. It was like soft, like sandpaper on wood. There was a kind of a raspy quality. And I think that's because, as he said in the interview, he's been campaigning for 56 days straight. As we speak now, 60. Now, I've been to conferences I think my longest conference was 7 days, and I spoke every day. And even at the end of 3 days, when you're on the road as a conference speaker, whether it's a debate or a series of talks or a seminar or some kind of parish meeting or even doing a live radio show, you're talking constantly. You wake up, you're ordering your food, you're talking to your host, then you're talking to people at a book table. If you're signing an autograph or getting a picture or meeting locals, or of course giving your talk, you're talking all the time. At the end, you're receiving people's thanks, you're getting to know them, you're asking them questions. You're always exercising your voice. I can't believe Donald Trump still has a voice. And he's like the ever-ready battery bunny. What is he, 78, 79? Amazing stamina, truly. And he said to Joe Rogan, he's kind of suspended golf because he's kind of in the dead heat and the seventh inning stretch before the election. But that's impressive. By any standards, you have to be impressed with the durability of his voice and his energy. Really kind of incredible. So he did say, talking about ocean environmental concerns and windmills and so on, he says if you put a cork in the Pacific Ocean near China, a week and a half later, it'll be in the United States. Now, I don't know why he says things like that, because that's actually not true. I looked it up. I did some research on seafaring freighters. So sea freight, so ships going with engines full, traveling from the Far East to the U.S. coast, let's say California, doesn't take a week and a half. It's between 15 and 30 days, depending on the size of the vessel and the speed. So the cork really doesn't make that quick journey. And then he starts talking about windmills. Windmills, they're killing the birds. They're killing the whales. Apparently, the vibrations of these windmills, if they're near the ocean, I mean, we're talking 50-story fans, right? Apparently, the vibration sensitivity of the whales is killing them. So now I don't mind when green extremism is mocked by facts, but I'm waiting for someone to do a meme. The windmills are killing the birds. They're killing the whales. And then he talks about something I completely agree with, and that is the nonsense about national polls. I don't know if Trump's ever been ahead in the polls. And I don't know how accurate polls are at all, whether it's Zogby, Lewis Harris, Frank Luntz. I have never, not once in my life, ever been called by a pollster, whether by mail or knock on the door or by email, text, nothing, never. I've never, and I don't know anyone who's ever participated in a national political poll. Do you? You can mention this in the comment section. So I think, as the kids say, there's a lot of bullshittery when it comes to polls. I don't think they're accurate. I think they're just, most of them are subsidiaries of the Democratic Party. Trump's always down, Harris is always up, and yet somehow Trump gets these stadium fulls everywhere he goes. He fills a stadium. You didn't see that with Sleepy Joe, the sniffer in chief, and you don't see this with the cackler. And yet somehow she's ahead. The math does not work out. The one feature of this interview that I thought was going to go deeper than any other topic that they discuss between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump is the idea he floats, and he expressed The word he used was interest. He's interested in getting rid of income tax. Now, income tax has only been with us 120 years. This is not part of the original vision of the idea called America by the church, the fathers of the country, framers and founders of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They did not foresee federal income tax. And he said he'd be interested in replacing it with tariffs. Wow. But then he just goes on to a new topic. Now, at 1 hour and 20 minutes, 30 seconds in, I'll put some timestamps in the show notes. Rogan returns to the topic of the loud noise event in Butler. Now, at this point, Mr. Trump points to two different places on his ear. Rogan asks him about getting shot in the head, and Trump points to two different places, and he interrupts himself all over the place. And he says it was a top shot, and then he says, "I got zicked right here." Well, let's roll a short clip here.
Do you even have a scar on your ear? You got anything on there?
I do.
What do we say? What do you got
So,
there?
right over here. It zicked right there.
Yeah. It healed up pretty good.
Well, it's pretty good, yeah.
Now, I don't know what the word zicked means as a verb. I think he means grazed. But he only shows Joe Rogan his ear like for a second, just very, very quick. And sorry, peeps, that ear looks pretty pristine to me. It does not look like the round of an AR-15 was shot him there. It just doesn't. And the way he quickly changed gears into another topic was strange and a little bit telling. So let's look at 10 weird features. This is something we talk about inside the True North community in our community chat. I'm not concluding anything. I'm not saying it was all staged. Okay, that's become a Democrat talking point. So I'm not necessarily agreeing with that. I am saying that there are features of that story in Butler that may help explain why Trump wanted to avoid talking about it. He just moves on to a different topic. Think about this. Work with me here. This is not a conspiracy theory. I'm asking questions about the known media account. We've all seen the same footage. Number one, why was President Trump allowed to stand up 4 or 5 seconds after the shots stopped? He disappears, and then the Secret Service jump him, and then 4 or 5 seconds later, he's standing up, his head's exposed, he's slow walked off stage left, then he does the fight, fight, fight gesture, and now you see two little lines of blood, and there's Old Glory flapping gloriously, perfectly framed in the background. His head's still exposed. This does not compute. Why was he allowed to remain in danger like that? Now, it doesn't work to say, well, the Secret Service confirmed that the shooter was neutralized. First of all, what's wrong with that? A, it was a failure of Secret Service that allowed this guy, allegedly, Thomas Crooks, to get on a sloped roof 130 yards away. That was a Secret Service failure. Secondly, A subsection 1, have you ever heard of a second shooter? It's the MO of assassination teams to never have one shooter. There wasn't one shooter in the hotel in Los Angeles when RFK was shot, and he was not shot by Sirhan Sirhan. There was not one shooter in Dealey Plaza around 1 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald did not do it. It was shooters, plural. So how could they know that there weren't more than one shooter? That's strange. Number 2, the bullet photograph. Remember that famous bullet? The bullet is sort of zinging by Trump's head. It looks like a line. Well, that would only be visible. I consulted a photographer about this. That bullet was flying over 2,000 miles an hour. It's an AR-15. It's a large round. And the photographer would have to have his aperture setting at minimum 1/8,000th of a second. That tells me that either he was tipped off that there was going to be a bullet flying and he was waiting for an exploding headshot, or a bullet zinging by the headshot, which would maybe qualify him for a Pulitzer Prize or something. But Trump's head should not be visible if the the shutter speed was set that fast. Not enough light would come into the camera to see Trump's head, but it's all perfectly framed there. So that's a question mark. By the way, the photographer is David Mills, who photographs for the New York Times. It's the same David Mills who photographed Andy Card. Remember that name? Andy Card? He was the chief of staff of President George W. Bush. Andy Card famously whispered into Bush's ear on the morning of 9/11 as Bush is reading books to school kids. Mr. President, whatever he said, Bush is alleged to have learned about the 9/11 attacks in that moment. Same guy. What, 19 years apart? What are the odds of the exact same photographer capturing those two critical nanoseconds in time? Weird. Another one. In the edited, ready-made, ready to roll and published 90 minutes or so after the event on Truth Social, Trump says that a bullet was shot through my ear. Shot through my ear. That's the phrasing. Those are his words. 2 days later, Eric Trump tweets that no stitches were needed. So he had a little bandage, and then after the bandage removed, all the pics and videos since show a pretty good-looking ear. There's no noticeable mark on his ear. Odd. Number 5, in his RNC speech, I mentioned this earlier, Mr. Trump described all the blood on his hand when he touched his ear, yet the footage from that day shows no blood. His hand is lily white before and after touching his head. That's a strange thing to get wrong when it just happened. Number 6, now I could fall down 100 times. People could tackle me over and over, and my shoes are not going to come off, especially if they're dress shoes and they're laced up. Trump does not go around barefoot. He doesn't walk around in socks. His shoe or shoes fell off. He says on a hot mic, I have to get my shoes. In fact, there's a photo of him. How did his shoes come off? That's a little odd. Number 7. Now, I don't mean any offense here, but the photo of him going fight, fight, fight with the American flag absolutely framed perfectly in the background. It's Iwo Jima-esque. Doesn't it strike you as a little too perfect? It's now on the side of one of those ugly Tesla trucks. It's T-shirts. It's a medallion. It's an amazing vote-getting iconic photo, especially since he said fight, fight, fight seconds after getting shot in the head, allegedly. So, it just is something that you're not supposed to ask questions about. Number 8. Now, this is an interesting one. This is hiding in plain sight. We're only allowed 2 or 3 different cell phone footage clips to be consumed. There's the main legacy media camera where you hear the pop, pop, pop. He looks at the graph and does this. There's that one. Then there's another one from his stage left showing the good guy sniper taking out Thomas Crooks. And there's a few other scattered photos taken in the crowd. Remember when the chubby Secret Service lady can't holster her gun and it's all kind of weird. It's all chaotic. Apart from that, no other footage is available. Why is it? Just look at the crowd behind Trump in the background. There are scores of people in the stands, and it's like a Taylor Swift concert. Everybody's got their phone up. They're all filming it. Why wasn't the internet flooded with footage? Oh, this is my Uncle Bob's footage. He was there behind Trump when he got shot. We're not allowed to see that back behind footage. Why? Was it a much smaller crowd than we're led to believe? Was there something about the back angle looking at Trump having the same angle that he did on the crowd that the government doesn't really want us to see? Why aren't there hundreds of video clips everywhere on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, different angles? I haven't seen any except for the 2 or 3, 4 at maximum. That's a strange feature to not be available to the public. 9, we're only allowed to see a couple of eyewitnesses. I can only remember 2. One, the alleged doctor who had what looked like pink Gatorade on his shirt, who attended to the fireman Corey, that apparently did lose his life in this event. May he rest in peace. But he didn't sound like a doctor. He sounded very casual, and he mentioned, yeah, there was some brain matter. Brain matter? Doesn't that evoke JFK? Brain matter? There was no name on the lower third. Usually there's like a chyron that indicates the person's name. Hasn't been seen from since. Then the BBC interviewed a kind of a jug-headed guy with a beard, looks like an Amish Trump supporter, MAGA red visor, and the BBC is interviewing him, and he's pointing to the left. About, yeah, right there. He's pointing to the sloped roof building where this guy allegedly climbed up and started shooting. But the camera is resolute. It will not move. No, normally the BBC are very explicit about who they're talking to. Nothing. We don't know the person's name. Could those have been crisis actors? We know they used crisis actors on the morning of 9/11 to plant the seed of the grand narrative that they intended to sell, namely two airplanes filled with 19 Saudis who failed their Cessna tests, but then were able to step into the computer-driven cockpit flight deck of a Boeing 767 and 757 and pull off unbelievable aeronautic maneuvers. Jet fuel went down to the buildings. Those were all ideas that eyewitnesses gave the morning of 9/11. And the Butler event reminds me of that. Finally, number 10. We don't know anything about this Thomas Crooks character. We've got a couple of photos. He looks like an Antifa incel nerd. Not a lot of photos of his AR. We only know he was in a BlackRock commercial, which is weird. He's like a cipher and gone down the rabbit hole. It's all very strange. So no wonder when Joe Rogan asked him about it, did Trump pivot immediately to, well, it's made me a tougher guy. Joe Rogan actually laughs when he says that. Then he starts talking about MMA fighters, and then the topic turns to Dana White, and they praise Dana White for 5 or 10 minutes, and they talk about boxing versus MMA, and that's kind of the sweet spot. Trump's a big fight guy. Of course, Joe Rogan made his bones in the MMA world as a fighter and as a commentator. So that makes sense. Then they talk about weight cutting and weigh-in controversies and the difference between the safety of boxing versus MMA and so on. And then Mr. Trump seems to deny supporting IVF and tax dollars going toward IVF. A lot of pro-lifers were very upset that he made this statement that he was a supporter of IVF and he thought taxpayers should pay for it. But he contradicts himself with this. Almost. This is at 2 hours, 28 minutes, 30 seconds. Again, they're not complete sentences. They're half phrases, clauses. Sometimes he'll stop himself in the middle of a word, but he does seem to reverse himself on the IVF thing. It's very unclear. And then he's asked about, then it gets interesting again. He's asked about the JFK files and why weren't they completely opened? And Trump's answer is, well, some good, smart people that you would think good and reasonable, like Mike Pompeo. He's a good person. And he urged me to not release the JFK files, national security, and there are still people living, et cetera, et cetera. Mike Pompeo is a good person. Well, according to sources close to Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks, after the WikiLeaks released CIA hacking tools, Mike Pompeo, who was then the CIA director under Trump, discussed with officials the possibility of murdering Assange. Technically, the word's not assassination. Assassination is when you kill the head of state or a monarch. That's assassination. But in this case, it would be first-degree murder. This is one of the things that Julian Assange says in his first and so far only press conference, that Pompeo had plans in place, or at least it was a topic of discussion to have him killed. So why not release the JFK files, the whole tranche of documents? And there's a lot of them. In most other government releases of previously locked up documents, they redact the hell out of them. It's just a sea of black deletions. But still, doesn't the public have the right to know what happened on November 22nd, 1963, the same day that Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis died? JFK was assassinated. Could it be that there are indeed people still living who have some inside information as to what really went down? Who was hired? Who conspired with the mob, with the CIA, with the FBI to craft the story of the lone gun nut narrative? The Lee Harvey Oswald was the one, and then, lo and behold, Jack Ruby, Jacob Rubinstein, has access to the Dallas Police Department. He walks in, and there's the perpetrator suspect who described himself as a patsy. Bang, one bullet, kills him dead. Dead men tell no tales. I think the reason why the JFK files have not been opened so far is kind of obvious. That people who know uncomfortable truths will be exposed as having kept them hidden. But significantly, Mr. Trump does say he will release them. He says that's going to be one of the first things that he does. So I'll be watching with bated breath for that. And I'm sure his nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., will also be interested. By the way, if you want to do some follow-up reading on the definitive guide to what happened to Kennedy, I recommend James Douglas's account. It's called JFK and the Unspeakable. That's Douglas with 2 S's. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. So, of course, they talk about UFOs. Now, the powers that be are really selling this UFO narrative pretty hard. This is a big distractive psyop. This is like the advanced predictive programming of Project Bluebeam, discussing UFOs. They just can't help themselves. It's like catnip to these peeps. And then finally, Trump says at 50 minutes after, it's almost the end, so it's 2 hours, 50 minutes, 22 seconds, he says, the prophets say that the end of the world will happen in the Middle East. Oh, wait, what? What prophets? Why would you drop a reference to the end of the world? So, my final comment is this rambling, meandering conversation, which had high points and a lot of fluff, a lot of things of interest only to those two, still, as of this recording, has almost 40 million views. And I think that's because of mimesis, also known as mimetic desire, the human nature theory of René Girard, in which people are made to love what others love and hate what they hate. And also, it proves the maxim of Marshall McLuhan that the medium is the message. All you need is someone well-known talking to someone else who's well-known. It literally doesn't even matter what they talk about. If Trump was talking with Joe Rogan about the dictionary or the Boston White Pages, I think he'd have millions of views because the content is the people, not the words, not even the topics. So that's a pretty impressive audience size for something that had no beginning, no middle, and no end. And I really think that the being interested in dropping income tax was the most striking thing of all. And maybe that'll come up again. Trump did say he wanted to return to the Joe Rogan show. So I would certainly be interested in seeing the second half. Apart from that, it was kind of a nothing burger. If you want to join True North, we'd love to have you. We'd love to learn from you on exposing false media bias and looking up the history of false narratives, psyops, predictive programming, and how you can make each day count. Check out patrickcoffin.media. We'd love to learn from you. In the meantime, be a saint. What else is there?